Can you hear me now? No one's on here yet. So, no, you can't. Adjusting. Okay, I think we're good. Hello, welcome. If you're watching the playback, welcome. I'm just giving people on the live just a minute or two to pop in and join. I hope everyone's having a great Friday. This week went by so fast, probably because Monday was the 4th of July. It's super hot and humid where I am, if you can tell by the largeness of my hair right now. It is so humid. My cat won't even go outside. She's like, I'm just going to nap all day because it is miserable outside. Hello, thank you for joining. Hi, Sarah. It's sunny here too. Yes, it is. It's sunny here. It's still, we had a super humid week. It's a little bit better today than it has been, but very humid. No, Siri, I'm not talking to you. Gonna be a hot day here. Yeah, it's one of those air conditioning days. I'm thankful for air conditioning on days like this. I forget about it, and I'm used to being in California, and it gets really hot, but we don't have the same humidity, so it hits a lot different. Hello, happy Friday, everybody. Eva. Jeez. So I got my cat. It's like a little bed. It has that Sherpa material on top of it. And it's just a little piece of like the Sherpa material. And then it has some padding in it. And underneath it's this crinkly paper that sounds like someone's just crinkling up a plastic bag. And every time she moves, it surprises me because I'm not expecting to hear that. But it's just her little mat. So if you hear that in the background, it's Eva. She is sleeping on her little mat and she's just adjusting. Because it's even too hot for her to go outside. She's hanging out inside. Okay, thank you all for joining. So today, Joe Biden made one of the biggest fumbles talking that I think I have seen him make yet. And people are calling him Ron Burgandy on Twitter. So I will show and play that for you. What did I have next? Wisconsin bans ballot boxes. So we'll look into that, which I think is a really good choice. There's this incredible piece by a parent whose daughter's school is encouraging kids to come out as trans. So we'll look at that. And then obviously the really big news of the day was the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, was assassinated. So we will get into that and sort of who he is and what happened. And what else? We can talk about some more. Democrats are ripping Biden for his oil policy because now we know that at least 1 million barrels of oil went to China. And that oil was from our Federal Reserve. And that release of the Federal Reserve oil was supposed to be for Americans to lower the gas for Americans. And we found out that 5 million of those barrels went out to Europe and Asia. 1 million of those barrels went to China alone. So there's that. This narrative that Biden has been pushing about I'm trying to do everything I can to lower the cost of oil is crumbling at a ridiculous rate. And this person right here, this is a Democrat who's saying that the gas prices are front and center for Americans and he needs to take this seriously. So we'll get into all of that. But first, let's look at this. It's almost unbelievable. I'm going to try to show you my computer so that you can see it. 109 degrees in Texas. Oh my goodness. And you have humid weather as well, don't you? I don't know if I would survive in Texas. I keep hearing really good things about Texas, and I'll be honest with you, I hate bugs. Like, I really hate bugs. And the humidity, I don't know if I'm tough enough to survive in Texas. I just don't know. And you have scorpions, don't you? That's a lot. That's a lot of bugs. That's the nice thing about living in an area that's a bit drier, like Colorado, very dry, no bugs. Hi, John. I'm glad you made it. Colorado, no bugs. Never had an issue with bugs. California, you would get like cockroaches and stuff in some of like the old, like really old buildings that are in more of a city area. But really, it's hotter down here in Mississippi. Oh, yeah. You're even more humid in Mississippi. That's what really gets me. It's not so much the heat, it's the humidity that just kills. The humidity on top of the heat is what kills. Okay, so I'm going to play this clip that literally just came out an hour ago of Joe Biden, and then I'll try to show it to you. I'll try to put my computer in front of the screen.
Women are not without electoral or political power.
Texas scorpions are just really, really bad bee sting that'll make you sick to your stomach. Ooh! Okay, so this was Biden. So he's signing an executive order. I'll have to look into exactly what's in the executive order, but this is him. He's signing an executive order today to federally protect women's rights to abortion. Now, executive orders, they're different because remember, our Constitution is made to protect people from the government. So when a president signs an executive order, that's only for like federal buildings and federal employees. That's not private citizens. They can't sign an executive order on a private citizen. So how this is working out, I don't know. Maybe federal buildings will have clinic. I have no idea the inner workings of this. But that's why so I'll be interested to see what exactly it is, but it is an executive order to protect a woman's right to abortion. But that's why when President Joe Biden first took office, he signed an executive order for a mask mandate for federal employees and in federal buildings. And a lot of people were saying, well, why didn't he do the mask mandate everywhere? Why did he just do federal buildings and federal employees? Because he doesn't have the power to do that. An executive order can only be federal. So like he's in charge of all these federal buildings. It can only be federal buildings and federal employees. You can't do that to private citizens. That's why we have our Constitution and they have to legislate stuff. But an executive order is different for that reason. Okay. So this is him giving his speech before he signs this executive order. I'm going to turn it up. I'll play it for you and then I will play it again and show it to you. But let me know if you can figure out why they're calling him President Ron Burgandy.
Majority writes, and I quote, women, it's a quote now from the majority, women are not without electoral or political power. It is noteworthy that the percentage of women who register to vote and cast a ballot is consistently higher than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line. Women are not without electoral and or political, or maybe precise, not and or political power. Majority writes, and I quote.
Okay, now I'll play it. I'll show it to you. It's too much. By the way, if you want to see the clip, it's on my Twitter. It's just my name on Twitter. Hold on, let's see. Let's move.
Majority writes, and I quote, women, it's a quote now from the majority, women are not without electoral or political power. It is noteworthy that the percentage of women who register to vote and cast a ballot is consistently higher than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line. Women are not without electoral and or political, or maybe precise, not and or political power. Majority writes, and I quote, women, it's a quote now from
That was definitely one of the worst ones that I've seen. For sure. One of the worst ones that I see. But what really gets me is Kamala, and I don't know who is the gentleman that's standing behind him. I don't know who that is. Maybe you guys do? Repeat that line, please. That is why he's being called President Ron Burgandy today. And what I want to know too is you see Kamala just standing behind him, and I want to know in that moment what is going through her mind. I want to know. She's like, this was supposed to be the height of my political career, and I have to stand behind this fumbling idiot. Hold on, I want to look at the comments. Someone said, the man is amazing. Oh my God, make it stop. Someone said, ladies, gentlemen, and birthing people, I present the most powerful man in the world. End quote. Repeat the line. Oh, man. Someone says, LOL, things don't get any better from there. Greatest U.S. president. Exactly. Someone said, how do those on either side of him keep a straight face? I know. That's why I want to know exactly what they were thinking while he was talking. It's amazing. All you can do at this point is laugh. I'm Joe Biden. Curly, Mo, and Larry. Someone says, so good, can't stop watching this. Sums up how far our republic has fallen in less than 2 years. I mean, it's incredible. Anyway, there's that. Had to share. Okay, let's talk about Wisconsin because... All right, Wisconsin. This is actually really good news. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has banned the use of unmanned ballot drop boxes for ballot collection in a tight decision released on Friday. The court ruled 4-3, oh wow, that is tight, that voters could not turn in their ballots into unmanned drop boxes and said that voters would not be allowed to give their ballots to others to drop them off for them. The court said that voters would have the option to turn their ballots in person or mail them in. Furthermore, drop boxes will not be used in the August primary for the general election. That's good news. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was Facebook who spent a lot of money buying some of these ballot boxes and putting them in places. An absentee ballot must be returned by mail, or the voter must personally deliver it to the municipal clerk at the clerk's office or a designated alternative site. The lawsuit, initiated by 2 Wisconsin voters, was brought against several entities, including the Wisconsin Election Commission and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Documents in question included guidance from the WEC on mail-in ballots and voting. The lawsuit alleged that drop boxes causes doubts about the fairness of the elections and erodes voter confidence in the electoral process. I totally agree with that. It just seems like a big hole in the chain of custody. I feel like in the chain of custody, there should always be, it shouldn't just be left there, out in the open. And why are tech companies buying these? There's a lot of questions. The key phrase is in person, and it must be assigned its natural meaning, said Justice Rebecca Bradley, who wrote the majority decision. She also said that the election regulations regarding ballot drop boxes should come from the legislator. Yes, a lot of these election laws were changed right before the election and did not go through proper legislation. And that was the issue that a lot of people had. So let's say that you didn't think that any funny business happened in the election. Well, there's still a very large problem with the fact that all of these laws were changed without going through proper legislation. And a lot of people were really upset about that. And they said that automatically delegitimizes things. If you didn't go through the proper course of action to change laws, but they used They used what was happening in our world at the time to justify changing all of these laws all of a sudden without going through the proper channels. The key phrase is, oh yeah, I already read that. Only the legislator may permit absentee voting via ballot drop boxes, she wrote. The court's liberal-leaning justices said the decision restricted the right to vote. It's funny that this was only an issue up until recently. Although it pays lip service to the import of the right to vote, the majority lead opinion has the practical effect of making it more difficult to exercise it. Justin Ann Walsh Bradley wrote in her dissent, the decision followed a lower court ruling that also banned the use of drop boxes. During the 2020 presidential election, there were about 500 ballot drop boxes in use in Wisconsin. 500, that's a lot. Republican candidates running to unseat Governor Tony Evers praised the court's decision. Former Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch called the ruling a huge win for election integrity. Trump-endorsed construction executive Tim Michels, another Republican gubernatorial hopeful, laid out plans for future election legislation following the decision. Michels' plans included banning private funding for elections and the elimination of the Wisconsin Elections Commissions. He said, I'm glad the court today sided with election integrity and affirmed our belief that unmanned drop boxes were illegal. However, to fully restore the integrity of Wisconsin's elections, we must defeat Tony Evers. We talked about him a lot a while back, and I can't remember why. Interesting. So that's a good decision. And when they're talking about private companies funding this stuff, it's just curious when a company wants to buy a bunch of drop boxes. That to me is a little sus. So I like that. That was good news. Okay, I want to read. This is a really interesting piece. Ben Shapiro had it on his Twitter. Bye, John. Have a great day at work. I saw this on Ben Shapiro's Twitter, and I find this really interesting. It gives a lot of insight into what is happening right now with young people, and I've seen it myself. So I'll just go ahead and start reading this. This is a parent who wrote this article on Substack. And she goes on to say, a quarter of the girls in my daughter's class identify as trans, 7 out of 28 students. When I said that on Twitter recently, I was roundly attacked for being a TERF who makes up ridiculous stories to harm trans people. While I may be a TERF, I did not make this up. A quarter of the girls in my kids' class identify as boys. One of them has had 4 names this year, all of them from anime series. I keep seeing people say, both on the Hell site Twitter and in popular media, that the trans population is a tiny minority, less than 0.1% of the population. If that is true, what is going on at my child's school? What has made the number of trans-identified girls in 1 year group grow from a constant 0 pre-pandemic to 25% now? And you're seeing that, and you're also seeing more and more girls. So typically, most of the trans community consisted of male to female, but now, especially among young teen girls, you're seeing an uptick in girls wanting to identify as boys. She said, and this is her theory, so here's my theory, and I know that this will be a familiar story for so many parents. The first issue is with what the school is teaching children. My daughter's trans identity started when the school taught a module on identity during which they told a group of 11-year-olds that if you feel uncomfortable in your body, it means that you are trans. My daughter had just had her first period 2 months prior to this class. Of course she was feeling uncomfortable in her body. She went home, looked up transgender on TikTok, and that was it. She was now trans. This is what really bothers me because this is a part of the conversation that is missing. Young boys and young girls, I can only speak for teenage girls because I was once a teenage girl, but it is so normal to be very uncomfortable in your body. Being a teenager, going through puberty, growing into yourself, that's why we call it the awkward phase, right? Like we all had an awkward phase, and I don't care how attractive you are, we all had an awkward phase. And now this awkward phase, I feel like, is being preyed upon, whether willingly or unwillingly, to people. And now that normal feeling of being awkward, of being uncomfortable in your body, is now being exploited to young people. And they're like, well, if I'm uncomfortable in my body, that must mean that I'm in the wrong body. There was this great movie, and even like as young girls, like I had girlfriends who, when they started growing boobs, they were embarrassed because they were the first ones to grow them and they didn't want any attention. Now, imagine a girl now thinking that, well, I'm uncomfortable with my boobs growing. Sorry if I'm being graphic, but it's true. I'm uncomfortable with my boobs growing, so that means I'm probably a boy. There's this really great movie. I don't know if anyone has ever seen it. My Life is an Awkward Phase. I know, but that's what we're not telling kids. We're not telling them that an awkward phase is totally normal. Being uncomfortable in your body is totally normal. In fact, it's healthy to go through that awkward phase and to come out the other side now, and it's empowering to go through that stage and come out the other side being confident and being proud of the things that maybe you used to be self-conscious about. Or, you know, maybe you're looking at other people and you're like, I don't look like them. I feel bad about my body. I feel bad about myself. But once you go through that phase and come out on the other side, it's almost like a rite of passage in some ways. That's why I've always been against, like, you look at someone like Kylie Jenner, and I know she's not on the topic that we're talking about, but she had all of this plastic surgery before her 18th birthday. And that was probably because why? She felt uncomfortable in her body. She wanted to do things to change her body to appear more attractive. But I can't stand when young girls get even that kind of plastic surgery so young, because it is normal and healthy to go through that phase and to come out of it the other side and to learn to love what you think are imperfections. It's very empowering. And it's so sad. And I see this awkwardness that everybody feels being exploited and being told that it actually means something else. And that very much needs to be a part of the conversation with young people. It's okay to feel uncomfortable in your body. It's okay to go through these changes and not understand. And yeah, we all have insecurities. We all at times wish we looked. It doesn't matter how beautiful you think the person is on the outside. Everyone has been insecure at one point in their life. Everyone has probably at one point in their life looked at someone else and be like, man, I wish I looked like that person, or I wish I had that trait, or that hair color, or that height, or that weight, or whatever. It's normal. There's this movie called Now and Then. Who's in it? Rosie O'Donnell, Goldie Hawn. A few other people are in this movie. Demi Moore is in it. But the movie, it's called Now and Then. It's set back in suburbia in the 1970s, and it's a group of 12 to 13-year-old girls, and it's sort of like, and they're friends, and it's sort of what happens during this summer, and it's kind of a coming of age story. And in the film, one of the girls, her name was, what was her name? Roberta. Her name in the film is Roberta. And her mother died when she was very young. So she was raised by her dad, and she had two brothers. So because of that, she was very much a tomboy. And because she grew up in a home with all boys, she started going through puberty. She started growing breasts, and she was very uncomfortable with her body. So she would actually tape her breasts down every day. And she was a huge tomboy. She would beat up boys. But then she actually met a boy that she had a crush on, And she started, you know what, like I can be comfortable with myself and how my body is changing, and I'm going into my teen years and stuff like that. But nowadays, this girl would be told, oh, you're a tomboy, you're uncomfortable in your body, you play sports, you do all that stuff, you're probably a boy. But really, it was just sort of a coming of age. It was going through this awkward stage. It was a result of her only being around boys in her household and feeling a little bit awkward and uncomfortable in her body. And that was a really important story that they told in that film. It was a coming of age. But we forget that you can have all of those feelings, but that doesn't mean that you are trans. Are there trans people? Yes. But this is also a normal part of being a teenager. Okay, sorry, I got off on a tangent. Let's continue. The second issue is a related one, and one that has to do with the school's nonstop celebrations of the LGBTQ plus identities. I used to be proud that my child attended a progressive school that is anti-racist, inclusive, and believes in social justice. We choose the school for these qualities. But in the last 2 or 3 years, this has meant a relentless stream of identity flags and rainbows. Transgender heroes like Jazz Jennings are worked into any part of the curriculum that they vaguely fit. This is a school for kids aged 9 to 13. I'm no prude, but I also don't think a constant parade of sexual politics is appropriate for such a young child. The third issue is with how the school is approaching the children coming out. Their official policy seems to be to just go with whatever the kids say without informing the parents. If a child says that they have a new name and pronouns, the school just rolls with it, and they create the scenario where an already distressed child ends up cycling through 4 names in 6 months. This is my problem too, because I'm not a parent, but I do understand that kids need some kind of structure, and they need black and white. And this, to me, is just like allowing them to change their name every so often, or change their genders every so often, or go in and out of all of these things at such a young age, creates chaos for them. She says, I say it seems to be the policy because the policy is nowhere written down or official. My child's name and pronouns were changed by the school without my knowledge. We didn't get so much as a phone call. When we have been at the school for years, we know the teachers well, we've been active members of the school community. None of this would matter if it was just about flags and fun ideas, but it is not. For my daughter, the name and pronoun change, which we foolishly went along with at the advice of a therapist, was a tipping point into depression and self-harm. It has made her miserable. Yeah, because this is creating chaos. A kid needs a structure to grow up in and to figure themselves out. When I spoke to the school about the harm that they are doing, they would not hear it. They told me that they celebrate all identities, that they pride themselves on being inclusive. They cannot see the trans issue as anything other than fun flags and inclusivity and respect. They do not see the dark side of what we parents do. We are trying to protect our kids from the bone-crushing puberty blockers and the taking cross-sex hormones when they are too young to have had sex. From having radical surgery on their developing bodies. Some days it feels like we are holding back a tsunami. I regularly speak to parents of other girls. Everyone has had a different response. Some have started to medicalize, others are against it. Some have brought binders, others not. Some have gone with the name changes, others resisting. The one thing that all the parents share is a sense of bafflement. What the hell is going on here? Why is 1/4 of the girls in the class identifying as trans? I guess in the 90s, a lot of us were in anorexic friend groups, said one mother. I think the similarities are striking, but there is one major difference. In the 90s, no medical professionals were encouraging these groups of girls and their skewed perception of their bodies and their self-harm. No school celebrated anorexia, but this time, the doctors and the schools are helping the anorexics to diet. That's a very interesting point. This is, back then, if you're comparing those two, this is clearly a social contagion. That's what it is. That's why it's spreading the way it is. But the difference here is that now, like this parent said, that medical professionals and teachers are on the side of this fad that could have lifelong damaging effects. A lot of these puberty blockers have lifelong effects. And these hormone blockers, all of those things can possibly make it to where you can't have children later on in life. And these kids are making these decisions when they're young and confused. And I don't care who you are. When you were that age, we were all confused. None of us knew anything. Hi, Mandy. But it's a scary world out there because people, and what I find with adults right now is it's really scary. They are so intertwined with their ideology that they will not see the truth when it's right in front of them. What they will do is they will bend truth to match their ideology instead of bending their ideology to match truth. And that's what's a little bit scary about all of this. And if you watch the Matt Walsh film, What is a Woman, Matt Walsh was actually interviewing, it was a woman to man, I believe, who had a lot of health problems and permanent issues because of the transition and things that went wrong. And I saw the other day too that if you fully transition, go all the way through, it will cost you, for going through everything, it will cost you about $100,000. That is a lot of money to be made by medical professionals. And when Matt Walsh was interviewing this person, the person said, "I'm a clinical psychologist in South Africa, and the U.S. is polluting the world with this practice." Wow. Yeah. Wow. It's interesting to see other people's perspectives on this stuff. And again, it really bothers me that we don't have the conversation with young people that it is totally normal. Just chill out, man. Just chill out. Allow yourself to feel uncomfortable. Go through life. Don't do anything permanent and see what happens. There were so many things that I was sure of when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and even 18 that now I look back and think, what was I thinking? There was one point when I was in high school where I was like positive that I was going to join the Air Force. Oh, I keep losing my point. But in this interview on Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman, the transgender female to male said, for the first time in history, you have a marginalized group that has a huge dollar sign on them. And it's so sad to see parents and teachers and professionals encouraging these medical things onto children who are understandably confused. And what are the long-term effects of all of this? We have no idea. And you can, right now, in a lot of areas, you can walk into a clinic and say, I think that I'm this, be given hormone blockers or some kind of medicine the same exact day. They'll start you on this process right away. There's no therapy involved. There's no, we need to wait, figure it out, questions. There's no period like that. You can go in, get medicine the same day. Okay. What do we do, Sarah? I don't know. I think we keep talking about it. I think that it's crazy because I used to work with kids. I first saw this a long time ago and I didn't know what it was. I used to work at a crisis center for teenagers. And way back then, I started seeing girls, a lot of teenage girls say that they were trans and identify as boys. And what I saw 9 times out of 10 was that it appeared to be a phase. They would say that they were a boy for a little while, but they would always go back to being a straight female. And I think we need to let our kids have phases without pushing things that are permanent on them. And that's what's really scary. You want to have a phase, that's okay. But now these permanent things are being pushed on them and they're being told there's like 45,000 sexualities and genders. I just think all of that stuff is way too confusing for a child. So when I worked at this place, I remember we had, when I was in high school, I went to high school in Georgia and my high school was very athletics driven. So there were a lot of like jocks and it was in the South. I think we were like state champs in wrestling. We had a really good football team, a really good basketball team. Yeah, let nature take its course. Some teenagers had like goth phases and whatever, emo. There was emo for a while. A lot of kids had emo phases. Well, anyway, when I was in high school, there was only one person who I knew of who was gay. It was a male, and he was a grade younger than me. He was the only person in our high school that was out as gay, and I watched him get made fun of a lot. I actually stood up for him a few times, but I did watch him get made fun of a lot. So fast forward to now I'm an adult, I'm working with teenagers, and we worked with an LGBTQ teen center that was down the street from us, and the head, the person that was in charge of this center, was coming in and he was going to do a group for, I was working with the teenage girls, he was going to do a group for the girls. And my thinking, wow, when I was in high school, there was only one kid who was out as gay and he got made fun of really bad. So I'm thinking, wow, this person's going to come in and teach a group to our kids. Like, this is so great. Like, he's going to come in and just say, hey, you might not understand somebody or the way that they dress or what they identify as. You might not even understand yourself, and that's okay. Respect everyone. You don't have to just give everyone respect, be kind, love everyone, blah, 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 blah. I thought that was going to be the messaging, which in my head, I'm like, wow, we've come a really long way, and what a great message. I'm so excited for this group. So I went and sat down with all the kids. I was in the group with them. This was years ago, by the way. Like, this was before this topic was mainstream. This was back in, this was like 2012, 2013, 2014. It was somewhere around there. So this was a long time ago, before this was as big as a conversation as it is now. So the guy comes in and we're all sitting down, we're all in the group, but he goes off into a direction that I wasn't suspecting. All of a sudden he starts giving us vocabulary words and handing out a sheet of paper with like words on it. And it was like, I remember seeing like pansexual and just like all these words that I had never heard of before. He hands out the genderbread man and saying there's all these genders and all these sexualities and all these things. And this was brand new to me. And I was sitting there and I was like, what? I was just confused. I was so confused. And I looked around at all the girls. By the way, my girls at the time, they were like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And I'm looking around at all of them and they're the same. They look confused too. Like, all of us were just confused. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but now I know what it is. So I started seeing this stuff a long time ago. So I will say this. I have hope because way back then, there was not a conversation about it like the way that we're having right now. So I do have hope because this stuff has been creeping its way into schools and into like centers like this for a really long time. And there's nothing wrong with all of these things, okay? If you're an adult and you want to identify as all of these things or do all these things, there's nothing wrong with that. But the way that it's being taught to such young people is really confusing them, I think, and really affirming things that they never would have or encouraging things, introducing things that these kids wouldn't be doing on their own. Like, let them be kids and teach these things when it's age appropriate. So I actually feel really good because that was a long time ago, and now we're actually talking about it. And at the time, I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know that it would get to the point of what it is now. And it's crazy because I generally went into this group thinking like, wow, this is going to be such a good thing. Like, he's going to have a positive message for the girls. And to me, that's really what it should have been. What it should have been and what would have been age appropriate for all of these girls was for this person to come in and say, hey, you might be confused with, your body, or you might be confused with other people, or this or that or this, but just accept yourself where you are, love everyone. That would have been a good message. So I'm actually optimistic. And I think the more people talk about it, the more you bring light to it. Because I think what happens too is that I think that most parents are pretty tolerant, and most parents want their kids to be tolerant, but I don't think they know the realities of what is being taught to their children and how damaging it can be to young people that are trying to grow up and figure out themselves and figure out the world and are trying to be accepted and are uncomfortable in their bodies. So, what I noticed too, we had some advocates that worked at the same facility, and they identified certain ways. I'm sure, yeah, some parents just don't care too, and that's just parents in general. There's a lot of great parents out there. There's a lot of really crappy parents out there. Trust me, I worked with them. I worked at a crisis center. There are a lot of terrible parents that really don't care. But I also noticed that when you were, so that I worked with kids that had a lot of issues. They had a lot of mental health issues. They had a lot of family issues. There was a lot of abuse and neglect and things like that with the kids that I worked with. So these are already very vulnerable kids who were just going through things that even us as adults would bring us to our knees. And I noticed that, and what you're taught when you start to work with these kids is you have to be very careful, because all of us have been through things in our lives. Some of us may have had trauma when we were younger, some of us not. So when you're working with these kids, sometimes when you're working with them, it can almost trigger things that happen in your past because you're working with such sensitive issues. So we were taught very early on, you have to be aware of yourself, you have to be objective, and you have to be able to remove all of your personal things that you have been through, all of your personal bias. You have to remove that or be able to separate that when you're working with kids, because you need to be their objective worker, right? You can't let that interfere in what's best for the kids. You have to remove yourself and do what's best for them. What I noticed is that these advocates were almost pushing themselves onto the kids, and that was a really big red flag to me. And that was with some of this gender affirming stuff. So one person was transgender, the other one was, I think she was a lesbian. Nothing wrong with either of those things, right? But what I felt is that the one individual was really pushing things onto the kids and giving them a little bit more encouragement in certain ways than allowing the kid to figure things out themselves. And I thought that was wrong. And again, that was back in 2012, 2013, 2014, one of those years. So that was a long time ago. That's how long this stuff had been going on. But I think stuff like that, it kind of slips in. And until it sort of pushes a little bit too much and people are like, whoa, what's going on? I was being tolerant, and now this is a bit much. It's a bit much. Oh, you know what, you guys? I'll tell you exactly what happened. Let's see if I can find this tweet. Oh, I hope I can find it. This is great. Yes. I'm going to tell you what happened. Oh, please load. Don't you do this to me now. Here we go. I'm going to read you something. I retweeted this a while back, and I think this is what happened, because I think that most people were tolerant and accepting, but it was just nothing is enough. So I'm going to read this to you. I think you'll like it. I have to get close because the text is so tiny. Okay. He says, this says, A message to the left from a gay man. It wasn't enough. Oh, you're angry because the reversal of Roe versus Wade? Okay, you're angry because you think they will come for gay marriage next month and gay relations. Okay, let's see whose fault is that per se. Any guesses? We're looking right at the issue right now. You. All we gay, bi, lesbians, and even some transgender people wanted was to be able to live our lives as normal people and blend in with the rest of the community with our partners. We got that back in 2015 and we were good with it. In fact, we were closing the fight after that. However, for you it wasn't enough. You sent your minions to a Christian baker who just wanted to bake cakes and follow his belief in God. You didn't go to the next store, you chose him so you could attack his beliefs. You did so many times over, I am surprised he's still in business. It wasn't enough. You began pushing Pride Month, where corporations would virtue signal by putting pride labels on their logos. You pushed it in every TV station across America, while they had to sit there and deal with the crap for an entire month. Yet, the birth of our nation, July 4th, only gets one day. Our veterans who fought for our freedoms in this country only get one day. It wasn't enough. You pushed your ways into the workplace and demanded that anyone who disagrees with LGBTQ needs to be silenced and fired for voicing their opinion, all for equality. It wasn't enough. You then forced your ways into the schools, silencing and shaming any opposition. If anyone said anything, even us gay people, we were all silenced, shamed, and attacked for our workplace by getting us fired. It wasn't enough. You pushed your way through convincing society that children under the age of 18 were trans at the drop of a hat. They needed to access hormone blockers and surgery. People disagreed. They were bigots, transphobes, haters, evil. It wasn't enough. We now have trans people who transitioned at an early age and are now regretting decisions that have forever mutilated their bodies and their lives destroyed. Yet when they speak up, they were silenced too and called phobes. It wasn't enough. Now you have trans activists calling out gay men, and if they don't want to accept trans men as men, then they are homophobic, even though by definition being gay means I'm attracted to the same sex, not gender. You called us homophobic, transphobic, and attempted to silence us. It wasn't enough. We now have drag queens reading to kids in libraries, doing very sexual, erotic dances, exposing themselves. Yet you want to call that teaching equality. If anyone spoke up against it, again, you called us phobes and Nazis. It wasn't enough. Now we have teachers pushing LGBTQ ideology along with pornographic books and teaching about wild sex positions while calling it LGBTQ, sex education. When we called it out, you called us Nazis, bigots, homophobes. Now we have more pride events with full nudity and very explicit actions being done in front of children. We have sex kink being brought into the mix in front of children. We have parents bringing their kids to Pride, exposing them to this stuff. When we called it out, you screamed the same names: phobic, Nazi, and then some. We were what you are trying to do. You are normalizing. We see what you're trying to do. You are normalizing the P word, pedophilia. YouTube. However, myself and many other LGBTQ peeps are calling you a-holes out. We're not going to let you do it. You destroyed equality for us, so we're going to make your lives miserable. You're not going to touch kids. You're not going to keep this going. It's ending now. We will call you out, expose you all to the world. When you start feeling that anger and hate flow towards you, calling us phobic is no longer going to work. You played your card too long and it ends. You only have yourselves to blame. Because it wasn't enough. It won't be enough for us until every single one of you are brought to some sort of justice. You're the P word. You are monsters in the shadow wanting to get close to any kid around. You won't pervert them so you can normalize grooming them. No, not anymore. Get ready because we are coming for you and you're bringing hell with us. There is no more discussion, no more reasoning, no more anything. You brought this all on because it wasn't enough. Sincerely, the LGBT community who just wanted equality. So there is actually a new group. They're called Gay Men Against Grooming or something. But it's a group of gay men that are sick and tired about this, because you have to think that early on in the LGBT movement, all they wanted was equality. All they wanted was to blend in and be accepted and be able to live their lives and have their partners and be left alone. They wanted to just be accepted into normal society, and it's being pushed and pushed and pushed by these activists. I don't think that all of these people that are pushing this on kids and that are doing all these things, I don't think that they speak for the whole gay community, the whole trans community, the whole LGBT community. I don't think so. I think these are extremists and they're activists, and they are hiding under the guise of pride and LGBT. And so these men are saying, we've had enough. You are not one of us, and we don't like what you're doing. We don't agree with what you're doing, and you are trying to take over our movement. All we wanted was equality, and you are pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. So that, man, I saw that a while ago and I totally forgot about that. And that's what this really is. It's not it's not about anyone being phobic against anyone or not wanting people to live their lives and be accepted. It's about these things are being pushed onto kids in schools, and we're starting to see the damaging effects of it. Yeah, but there's this entire group of gay men that are basically calling this stuff out. That person deserves a big bear hug. Uh-oh, it's thundering. Okay, bye, Germany. We actually had a pretty crazy lightning storm the other day. It was at night and it was kind of far away. I was driving home. I think it was about 11 p.m. I was driving home, and off into the distance, it was really cloudy out that night, but off into the distance there was a huge lightning storm, and it looked crazy because it was just lighting up the clouds. Ooh, it was kind of creepy. Ugh. Okay, let's talk about this is really interesting because this is a Democrat from California who is criticizing Joe Biden's oil policies, or whatever Joe Biden is doing on oil. So, remember that San Francisco men's choir? I do. I actually do think that was a parody, but it wasn't a good look. It was in very poor taste, very, very poor taste. I think it might be on your end. I don't have any buffering here. The other day I had really bad connection issues, so I actually had to end the live stream. Okay, so this is a Democrat from California, of all places, criticizing Joe Biden. So Rep. Ro Khanna criticized his party's leader, President Joe Biden, Thursday for not doing enough on oil policy as Americans continue to pay close to $5 a gallon at the pump. Khanna made an appearance on Fox News and said he doesn't understand why the Biden administration has not banned oil exports to help lower the price of gas for Americans. He said, I don't understand why we aren't having a ban on exports. I do think we have to be doing more. People in my district, they're talking to me about gas prices. They're talking about higher food prices. They're talking to me about the airlines getting canceled. These are all issues front and center. He's right. Khanna's comments come after Reuters reported Tuesday that more than 5 million barrels of oil that President Joe Biden released from the strategic reserves were sent to European and Asian nations, including China. Biden Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked about the U.S. oil making its way around the world, and she said she was not aware of the matter and would look into it. This is the White House press secretary. She should have been prepared to answer this question. And this is one of the biggest pieces of news that came out amid, the suffering that the American people are having. And she just hadn't even heard of it. She didn't hear of it. This is the White House press secretary. Kayleigh McEnany would have had, that would have been page 3 in her giant book that she always kept. Nearly 1 million barrels of oil released by Biden's order made its way to a Chinese company connected with the president's son, Hunter Biden. Chinese-owned company Sinopec, which has an American branch called Unipec, received close to 1 million barrels of oil from the U.S. strategic reserves in the sale with the U.S. government. By the way, this release of our U.S. strategic oil was supposed to be for Americans. It was supposed to be released to Americans to help with the higher gas prices. And 5 million of these barrels were sold off. Sinopec has a prior history with the Bidens. In 2013, Hunter Biden co-founded the private equity firm BHR Partners. In 2015, BHR acquired $1.7 billion stake in Sinopec Marketing. In 2017, Biden took a minority stake in BHR, purchasing a 10% stake with an LLC he solely owned called Skinetels. Sure. Last year, an attorney for Hunter Biden told the New York Times that Hunter no longer holds any interest directly or indirectly in either BHR or Skinetels. Sure. As recently as March, records in China's National Credit Information Publicity System showed that Skinetels still retained its 10% stake in BHR. Business records in Washington, D.C. still listed Hunter as the sole owner in that company at the time. It is not clear whether the Chinese records were accurate or needed to be updated. So there's that. It's nice to see a Democrat, especially a Democrat from California, call this out because he's absolutely right. Biden keeps saying, I'm doing everything I can to lower the cost of oil. Actually, you're not. You just sold 5 million barrels to Europe and Asia when that was supposed to lower the prices for Americans. So you're actually not. And in fact, you're making it worse. Not to mention, you guys, refinery expansions in the Virgin Islands and Alaska were halted by Biden. Lease sales were canceled in Utah, Alaska. Where else? The Gulf of Mexico. So he's absolutely not doing everything he can. In fact, it's almost like he's purposefully making it super expensive. And he also said himself, during his campaign, he said he wanted to end fracking. So it's really not a surprise. He said it himself during his campaign, basically what his plans were. All right, you all. Well, that's all I have this afternoon. I'm going to be live again tonight at 8 p.m. So if you want to join again at 8 p.m., I'll be live. It's Friday, so bring a drink if you want to. And I hope to see you guys there. Have a really good rest of your, this keeps getting up and I will, oh no. I hope to see you guys tonight. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and bye. Let's go, Brandon. All right, bye you all. President Trump had STR at 90% and Biden at 50%, lowest levels in decades. Wow. Okay, thank you very much, you guys. I will. All right, bye. I hope to see some of you later tonight. See ya. Ah, my hand's out of the way.